Urgent! Pokrovsk has become bait for the enemy. Our forces are firmly keeping the situation under control. These shots of intense confrontation are striking. The enemy is holding its ground. Putin's generals are trying to push further. The south is in real danger. At this very moment, a new front is unfolding there. Ukrainian forces have found a way to dampen the enemy's fervor and strike at a sensitive spot. Is an operation on Russian territory similar to the Kursk one really being planned? The answer to this question is in the following report.
Over 60 times in the past day, the Russians have tried to break through to Pokrovsk. According to preliminary estimates, more than 200 people were eliminated in these assaults.
The situation is very difficult because the enemy is desperately trying to achieve the maximum result with the forces and resources they have. And at the same time, which is also of particular concern, is that the enemy is advancing eastward toward Kostiantynivka, moving in the direction of Popiv Yar and Ruzen Yar. This indicates that the enemy is putting the maximum of their resources and combat potential into this offensive push. In order to hold them back, well, we need to show exceptional resilience and exert every bit of the resources we have.
At the same time, one of the enemy's sabotage and reconnaissance groups caused quite a stir in the press. It is known that 3 groups in armored vehicles managed to enter the outskirts of the city. It is reported that the sabotage and reconnaissance group was detected, partially destroyed, and those who survived were taken prisoner. Also, according to analysts, there was no real expectation of success since the group had virtually no support from artillery or drones. They were, as they say, taking their chances, but fortunately, luck was on the side of the armed forces of Ukraine.
They can't really cause any significant harm. So they they start some skirmishes, shell the positions of the defending troops, that is the armed forces of Ukraine, and try to create some, they try to spread panic, try to sow chaos in the defensive lines, and accordingly they must be eliminated. These individuals are, in general, the people within these specific groups are essentially suicide squads. Because, once they inevitably end up deep within the city, this particular group invariably gets completely surrounded and, their ultimate fate is indeed grim.
In southern Ukraine, the occupiers have achieved minor success in the area of Mala Tokmashka in the Zaporizhzhia region. In the Kherson region, however, Russian assaults have only resulted in losses for the Russians. At the same time, experts say that Moscow has been preparing reserves in the occupied south for a long time, and it will soon become clear in which direction they intend to use them.
This week, we are expecting precisely the redeployment that will show what the Russians are preparing for. In other words, they now have these resources and their units stationed there, which they will withdraw and after completing preparations, move to the front line. They don't move them far. It could be either Zaporizhzhia or the northern part of Donetsk region. In fact, what interests us most is which point they will focus their maximum efforts on.
Recently, the Sumy direction has also become more active. Traditionally, the main fighting there is for the settlement of Vovchansk.
At this moment, the enemy is taking advantage of the fact that this area is a nature reserve and also of the wide forest belts and mixed forests here, which make it very difficult to observe movements. That's why the enemy is trying in the area of Vovchansk on the outskirts of the city to do everything possible to advance specifically through the forested terrain. But again, the defense forces are working to block the enemy. There are no significant successes on the battlefield.
The Russian advance has also stalled in the area of the village of Mylov. According to Russian propaganda, a new front was supposed to open there in the Kharkiv region. However, according to the armed forces of Ukraine, the enemy has not achieved any success for a week now, only losing soldiers in vain attempts to advance.
Although they have been drawn into that pocket, which is currently the most comfortable for our defense, and systematic work is being carried out to destroy the enemy, they are unable to expand this breach.
Our command also reports that, in addition to direct fighting on the front line, Ukraine has achieved success in operations behind Russian lines. Obviously, after assessing how much and what the Russians are bringing to the front, a solution was found so that all of this, if it didn't stay in Russia, would at least move much more slowly. And that solution is strikes on the railways.
This is about logistics, about supplying the necessary resources, and the strikes are hitting quite hard. And right now, it's no coincidence that we're waiting for good news from Novocherkassk, because the railway has always been a priority for the Russians in building their military logistics. This logistics, specifically the North Caucasus Railway, is precisely aimed at this section of the front. That is, this is the southern section of the front for the Russians, and it is where they are transferring the relevant resources to the Donetsk region. This also includes the Pokrovsk direction, among others.
Against the backdrop of recent insider reports about the conversation between Trump and Zelensky, the theories that the Ukrainian armed forces will soon advance no longer seem unfounded. This is already being openly discussed in the Russian State Duma, and according to experts, the General Staff is seriously considering such a scenario as early as this year.
Ukraine is considering the issue of preparing for offensive actions. And here, it's not a counteroffensive, but an offensive that is intended to lead to the defeat of the enemy on the southern front, followed by the loss of Crimea. In the event that Ukrainian defense forces reach the coast of the Sea of Azov, the fate of Crimea will be decided within 2 to 3 months. These are obvious facts. As strange as it may sound today, we are thinking about this.
At the same time, of course, no one is officially talking about an offensive. The Ukrainian command has worked on its mistakes, and now both the direction of the strike and its timing will only become known to Russia in real time.
A true hunter in the sky. The new UAV of the armed forces of Ukraine is going on the hunt. Its prey includes Grad rocket launchers, artillery, trucks loaded with ammunition, and even entire companies of occupiers. And that's just the beginning of the list of targets it is erasing from the enemy's map. The Danish drone, which has become a Ukrainian ally, now doesn't just fly, it turns the front line into an arena of precise destruction, relentless work, iron endurance. You have to see this with your own eyes.
I think I see some movement there. Look, he's right next to it. We can fly right over it now.
Let's get closer.
This is the work of the 411th Separate Drone Systems Regiment Yastrubi. The guys are watching the enemy from the sky and finding targets for strikes thanks to the Danish bird, the RQ-35 Hey Drive 1. This beauty often operates at night. This is a Danish-made drone that conducts reconnaissance missions, and right now it's already ready to detect enemy targets.
On average, the crew makes 5 flights per night. Overall, the intensity of work and the number of flights depend on many factors. This includes enemy jamming. Our own jamming also operates during air raid alerts.
The RQ-35 Hey Drive 1 is ideal for nighttime operations. It is a quiet, mobile, and reliable scout. It gives the fighters a real advantage. It allows them to see the enemy while remaining unnoticed. It enables precise strike adjustments and real-time response. It can stay in the air for over an hour and a half. After launching the drone into the air, the operators monitor it on the computer screen. One of the operators controls the drone, while the other watches the camera feed.
Night operations have their own nuances, because we work with thermal signatures and also use a certain life hack, switching the camera to daytime mode to check if any vehicles are driving with their headlights on.
The guys locate targets and relay the coordinates.
Good evening, Mr. Operations Officer. We see movement in the area of interest, the place from where the pressure is coming. So how do we find targets? Well, by now we probably know this area like the back of our hand. After all, we've been flying here for a year, so we more or less know their supply routes and when their rotations happen. That helps us find and neutralize them.
Sometimes the enemy complicates the work of our drones, trying to jump the signal or feed in false coordinates.
There are a certain number of satellites. We don't use them, but the aircraft can see them. They're fake, yes. That means someone is feeding it those coordinates. So the Ruskin knows we're here.
And even if the drone temporarily loses connection with the operator, it still completes its mission autonomously.
If there's absolutely no established connection between the radio system and the aircraft, it will automatically return to its pre-programmed mission, which we have carefully configured and set up beforehand.
And such a drone can find various targets for strikes.
We've targeted Grads, we work on counter-battery missions, meaning enemy artillery. We target personnel during rotations. The same goes for vehicles involved in these rotations, transporting personnel. These are both passenger cars and trucks.
And importantly, this drone is reusable. Our UAV pilots successfully bring it back after every mission.
Sometimes it happens that the plane lands somewhere and they can't find it. But then a farmer plows the field and finds our little plane and they return it to us. Thank God, everyone is working together for victory.
Why is it circling now?
It's adjusting.
These reconnaissance drones are the eyes of the Ukrainian military. Day and night, they keep the enemy under control. And it is thanks to these little birds that the armed forces of Ukraine see everything and strike first.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Announcer: Russian aviation is falling apart before the eyes of the whole world. There is panic in the Kremlin. The generals are in hysteria. Fire is consuming planes. Helicopters are falling like leaves in autumn. The enemy's air power is bursting at the seams. They can no longer hide it. The war has completely drained the resources of Putin's air fleet. What will happen next? We'll tell you in a moment.
Announcer: a new tragedy in the Russian sky. This time, the victim was a passenger AN-24. The aircraft was flying from Khabarovsk to Tinda with a stop in Blagoveshchensk, but lost contact at the most critical moment shortly before landing. According to the Far Eastern Transport Prosecutor's Office, during landing the plane was unable to touch down and went for a second approach. It was at that moment that contact with the captain was lost.
Kazakh voiceover. During an aerial reconnaissance mission with a Mi-8 helicopter in a remote area on a mountainside, the aircraft fuselage was discovered.
Narrator: the wreckage was found just 15 kilometers from Tinda airport in the Amur region. The plane was only a few minutes away from reaching its final destination. There were 49 people on board the AN-24, including 6 crew members and 43 passengers, among them 5 children. All of them died. While officials are cautiously mentioning a possible technical malfunction, more and more details are emerging in the media. In the land of the great and mighty, they continue to operate aircraft that are already half a century old. The AN-24 was produced in January 1976 and made its first flight as early as February. Since then, it has spent decades in the sky despite its age, outdated technology and numerous accidents.
Russian news channel. The Transport Prosecutor's Office of the Angara region is conducting an investigation into the rupture of the left landing gear element of the AN-24 aircraft.
Ukrainian news. An-24 landing gear caught fire during landing in regional center, arrived from Bodaibo.
Anchorwoman: yes, half a century ago this aircraft was cutting edge, but today it's a flying coffin that should have been scrapped long ago, yet it continues to operate flights. And this is happening in a country where the authorities have been talking for years about greatness, billions in oil and gas revenues, import substitution, and sovereign aircraft manufacturing. Every year they promise advanced Russian aircraft on television. They showcase their might at parades, but in reality it's 50-year-old junk on civilian flights and dozens of fatalities.
A Russian expert has stated, indeed, the imposed sanctions directly and significantly affect the overall state of aviation within the Russian Federation. In fact, as of today, Russian citizens and entities are unable to procure essential spare parts for the hundreds of thousands of foreign-made aircraft they currently possess. And many of these modern aircraft are simply sitting completely idle at various airports, at numerous airfields, and they absolutely cannot get them into the air because these crucial planes aren't being serviced or maintained on time. So they are consequently forced to utilize old, outdated Soviet-era equipment like the venerable AN-24 and so on, virtually anything that can still manage to fly, for which they can somehow find at least some essential spare parts, even though these particular aircraft have long since completely exhausted their operational service life. They are forced to get them in the air and use them to transport people.
Narrator: the permanent head of government, Mishustin, has already formed the government commission. It is headed by the Minister of Transport, Andrei Nikitin, the very same person under whose ministry dozens of such dinosaurs continue to fly in the skies of Russia. But isn't all of this the result of one big crime called the system? And incidents like these have only become more frequent since the start of the big war. Both civilian and military aircraft are breaking down. From 2022 to 2024, there were 82 aviation incidents in Russia, including 40 crashes and 104 casualties. And with each passing year, this number has only increased. All of this is a consequence of the bloody war, which is hitting every sector of the Russian Federation. And the longer the aggressor state remains mired in this protracted bloodshed, the more devastating the consequences will be for itself.
Announcer, that's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more hellish news from the front in our next broadcast. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you soon!